Welcome back to African American Literary and Film Tropes. Today we're going to talk about the Big Black Buck, or the Big Scary Black Man. I'm using Donald Bogle's Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks as a starting point in understanding these racial tropes. I really encourage everybody to get their hands on this book because it does a deep dive and films over several decades, showing how these things play out again and again and reinforce these tropes. So, the buck. Okay, so the buck is a black man that is depicted as hyperviolent, hypersexual, and basically a savage beast, most often targeting unsuspecting white women. You can see this in some of the earliest depictions in the 1917 film Birth of a Nation. However, it was at the end of American slavery and shortly thereafter that the buck stereotype became increasingly popular. It was encouraged and promoted to justify lynching and racial terror by framing black males as threats to society. So here we see the cult of true womanhood. White men believed that they must defend white women and their purity from the revenge of these newly freed black men because now that they were freed, they could be the true violent savages that they had always been. And the importance of protecting these white women is rooted in the cult of true womanhood, sometimes called the cult of domesticity, which I will talk about later. But most importantly, you should just know that it was the idea that women need to have these particular expectations in order to be a true woman. Of course, what happens by vilifying the black man and painting him as a savage, an uncontrollable, insatiable sexual beast is that it creates the Ku Klux Klan and whips other white men who might not have been in the KKK into a retaliatory frenzy. White women had to be protected at all costs from the black men who would taint their womanhood. The creation of the black buck now justifies their behaviors and becomes a permanent mainstay in popular media. That is radio shows, films, songs, postcards. We can go into lynching postcards, but not today. All of this portraying black men as incapable of handling their lust, incapable of avoiding violent behaviors, and being so savage that they had to be policed and inevitably tortured and murdered. Now, this is all happening while turning a blind eye to the amount of slave owners and ex-slave owners and merchants who were raping black women, indigenous women, Asian immigrant women throughout this whole torrid ordeal. And behind this notion of the superhuman black man bent on revenge continues to grow. The hysteria of the black savage inevitably becomes the stuff of nightmares. And I mean that literally. King Kong. I know, King Kong, giant ape, sci-fi movie. You know, he ends up climbing the Empire State Building. We all know the story. But all three King Kongs, from the classic 1933 version all the way to the latest one by Peter Jackson, feature a big black ape who falls in love with a sensitive, beautiful, delicate white woman. The unspoken fear about black-white sexual relations have been remarked on by film historians and cultural critics ever since. The 1933 original stoked anxieties about black male hypersexuality. Now, you can read a lot more about this. Karen Grigsby Bates did a talk about it on NPR called Racing King Kong in 2005. And if you want to see how they break down race and monster and otherness, that's the place to go. The use of the monster as the other, as the ethnic other, the racial other, has been a part of horror and sci-fi for time immemorial. Still, this trope persists because the black man is something to be feared. I'm emphasizing thing because the depictions imply a subhuman status. Also, sometimes it persists simply by reinforcing it. Coined phrase by James Baldwin, half devil, half child, was his critique of whites' views on blackness. Later, super predators was coined in the 1990s, a dog whistle for young black men, fueling harsher sentencings for young black boys, which harkens back again to the buck.
I'm so scared. It's like 5 big ass black men around us.
Still, this trope persists that the black man is something to be feared. Sometimes it persists by reinforcing it, but sometimes it persists by rewriting it. So many black men have experienced, and sometimes exploited, the stereotype of the black buck, while simultaneously refusing to be flattened into two-dimensional characters. They resist that first glance, that glance that determines that they are dangerous, that you should clutch your purse, you should move to the side of the road. They resist being put into that category. We can see that across the board in contemporary media. We can see that across the board in entertainment and films. For example, RZA, or Bobby Digital, if you know, you know, from the leader of the Wu-Tang Clan, is also a martial arts cinephile, an avid chess player, and on this beautiful spiritual and holistic journey. David Banner, we know him as a rapper, but he's also a social activist and educator. The way that he showed up during Hurricane Katrina is to be lauded. Big boy of Outkast. Do I really need to say anything? He breeds owls. If that is not turning our idea of the big black buck, the angry, violent savage, on its head, he loves his owls. Owls, birds. Also, we can see black men involved in other artistic things such as pottery, ballet, classical music. I really wish I could remember the opera singer that does rap songs in an operatic style, but his name is slipping my mind right now. But all of these types of men who would normally be categorized as black bucks shows that that sort of stereotype can be rewritten. If you want to know more, I suggest that you read, again, Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks by Donald Bogle, Native Son by Richard Wright. When you come across Bigger Thomas, you'll understand. If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin, The Scottsboro Boys by James Haskins. If you want to watch something, buckle up. Birth of a Nation. It's going to be stressful, but I do suggest it. The Murder of Emmett Till is another good one. There's plenty of great documentaries, but some of you already have some things in your mind that you've already seen. You're probably thinking